Amusement park employees, what is your horror story? I was a caricature artist for Six Flags, and one day a dad and his son came up and wanted a drawing of the two of them. The way our pricing worked was that we charged per person in the drawing. The father wanted a simple black and white headshot of him and his son. A single headshot was $10, so for the two of them, it would be $20, before tax. I very clearly explained this to them, asking several times if they were okay with the final price, and they excitedly agreed. Fast forward to me ringing them up at the register, and I tell them the total, $24 and some change. The father's happy and friendly demeanor quickly dissipated, and he began arguing with me about the price. I calmly explained the pricing situation and apologized if I wasn't clear enough. I gently reminded him that he had understood and agreed, otherwise I wouldn't have done the drawing. Big mistake. He got angrier and started yelling at me, cursing me out for lying and overcharging them, to put a few more coins in my pocket. He accused me of preying on parents and their children, thinking I could take advantage of them because they're stupid suckers. He tried to take the drawing without paying. When I held it back and told him he couldn't, he threw a $10 bill at me and snarled that it was all he was going to pay. He said I was worthless and my drawing wasn't even good and didn't deserve any more than that. I was really upset at this point, but I handed him the drawing and wished him a good day. "Screw you," he yelled in response. The whole time his son was standing there, looking embarrassed and terrified. The dad proceeded to pace back and forth in front of my stand, alternating between coming back to the counter to yell at me and chasing customers away, screaming at them about how I was stealing money, and how the stand was a huge freaking ripoff. Thankfully, his charade lasted only about 20 minutes before the police finally got him out of there. It left me pretty shaken, though. I had to take my break early and cried during my lunch. I operated a few different roller coasters during my fun-filled summers at this amusement park, but most of my horror stories come from one ride in particular. The train was one of those that you had to step into, with a lap bar restraint. On one particular day, it was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit and the ride had been running as usual for most of the morning. As we were loading the train, a guest came up to me to say that there was an awful smell coming from the front car, and my stomach immediately dropped. Usually with these types of complaints, we'd find that the previous rider had one too many slushies before riding and had lost their lunch. Gross, but we were used to cleaning that kind of stuff. I started approaching the front car and immediately called for my coworker to direct everyone out of the train and back into the line, and to call our supervisor to close the ride. Instead of a normal puke situation, I found that someone had diarrhea all over the front car, from the seat down to the floor. Whoever was the last person to ride had the accident and hadn't bothered to tell anyone about it. Cleaning up after someone gets sick is one thing, it's absolutely disgusting but it can be done. But trying to clean up that kind of liquid mess in over 100-degree weather, off of the floor of a car where you had to kneel down and stick your head into the car to reach the very front, is a situation that I never would have imagined even in my worst nightmares. The ride was down for the rest of the day, and it took over an hour to clean everything out of the car before we could start really sanitizing it. Many moons ago, I was an assistant director of security training at a park known for its cartoon mice. While doing a walk-around of the park with a group of new hires, I got a call about a possible indecent exposure incident in Fantasyland. Knowing that was the most popular place for children in the park, even more so than Toontown, I rushed the new hires through the backstage area to cut down on travel time. While we were backstage behind the Small World ride, one of my trainees pointed out someone dropping their pants and leaning against the building. Before we had a chance to close the distance, a blast of brownish-yellow liquid exploded outwards in a fan pattern. I stopped the group, got on the radio and informed them of the bio-incident, then slowly made my way to the guy. When I was about 10 feet from him, he looked up, smiled, then blasted the wall again. Without a word, he pulled up his pants and started to walk away. Before he was able to leave the area, Anaheim police apprehended him. After questioning him, they called for an ambulance. Upon talking with the police sergeant, I found out he was a well-known homeless man from the neighboring city of Orange, usually picked up for exposing himself to traffic. The kicker, though, was that he wasn't the subject of the initial call. When we finally got to Fantasyland, we found out that someone was complaining about a woman breastfeeding. 3.5 years of working there, and that is one of the events that still feels fresh in my mind. So Six Flags has a lot of really dumb rules for their employees, which causes there to be a crazy high turnover rate. That, on top of the fact that on this particular day it happened to be the hottest day of the summer in New England, meant that after having only worked there for 2.5 weeks, I was the most senior person in my department of Kidzopolis. This means I have to run the whole operation schedule for my department and tell everybody where to go and what to do all day. Keep in mind, I don't even know half of these people's names. On top of that, nobody knows how to operate the freaking Zoom jets. So my supervisor grabs me first thing in the morning and tells me he's going to teach me how to operate this ride. Things are going alright when about halfway through this training my supervisor passes out, because it's like 110 degrees. So now I'm supposed to be leading this department full of people I don't know, while operating a ride I don't know how to operate, and if I have any questions, then I have no one to ask because my supervisor is unconscious somewhere. Meanwhile, I'm getting calls and someone's like, "Hey, so Sally passed out in the splish-splash zone," and I'm just like, who the heck is Sally? Julie is calling me and telling me she's feeling dehydrated and needs to go on break, and I'm like, listen, I've got Julio trying to operate the crazy cups and the wacky wagons at the same time. What makes you think we have enough staff to let you go on break? Fast forward to the end of the day, I've had 3 people faint because of the heat. I still don't know most of my co-workers' names, but I did get yelled at in Spanish over the phone a lot. And because I felt bad that nobody got enough time on break, I told everyone they could go home and I'd sweep up the department on my own. I got pretty good at the Zoom jets, though. I once had to height check a girl who was both mentally and physically disabled. This was just as they were about to get on the ride, as someone else previously hadn't bothered to check her height to begin with. So I politely asked her and her carer to come and check her height, after a lot of no's, and as luck would have it, she wasn't tall enough, of course. She didn't take it well and started screaming, saying she was going to ride no matter what. After I left to let the carer talk to her, she finally left her seat after about 10 minutes, which is an eternity in roller coaster time, and I saw her walking off. I mean, yeah, it sucks, but I was just doing my job. I was relieved that she was finally going, but then as she was walking through the exit, she turned around and screamed, "I hope you die." So that was nice. It was hilarious but still soul-crushing at the same time. Also, it was my birthday. I quit not long after. I worked at an amusement park for several summers as a teenager, and at a haunted house at one of them, off and on. Neither of the parks I worked at was a dry park, so drunk parents ranked among the worst. The haunted house was particularly fun, as later groups tended to involve drunks. I took a bad kick to the ribs once while working under an overhang, and we had at least one violent incident a night. For further perspective, most of us were high schoolers and not all that intimidating. As for the actual amusement park, the most messed up thing was when I was sent home early once for a bit of weather coming, which wasn't that odd. They said I should have time to get home, though. I lived half an hour away. What I didn't know was that I was sent home during a tornado warning. The warning was posted when they sent me home. They knew the line of storms was about to hit. I ended up pulling over after a tree branch hit my car and got stuck in a hailstorm. The roof of my car was dented. No tornado actually touched down, but we had bad straight-line winds. A few other employees were also told to go home and had pretty similar stories about their attempts. The woman working the office that day just decided, on her own, that we'd be better off going home than staying in the fairly solid, permanent buildings on the premises. Basically, once we were gone, it wasn't her problem. I worked on the Dueling Dragons at Universal Orlando when in college. For those who don't know, the Dueling Dragons were 2 separate coasters that dueled and had several near misses with each other. They were pretty unique at the time and were super fun. As you can imagine, Universal told people to empty their pockets before they rode so that their phones and stuff wouldn't fly out and smack somebody on the other coaster at 60 miles per hour. Of course, many times people would ignore this because they're lazy and stupid. I was working one day when the ride shut down completely. Change had flown out of someone's pocket and hit a guy in the eye, leaving him blind in that eye. The tragic part was, the guy was already blind in his other eye. Now the guy is 100% blind. They didn't duel anymore after that, and the ride was left permanently much lamer. I still feel for the poor blind guy, but the irony is comedic in a dark sort of way. Since a lot of people are asking, this happened in 2011. I worked at a water park when I was in high school, not the sort of amusement park most people think of, but still an amusement park. The park had lots of large pools with a shallow section and a deep section, separated by rope. For some reason, parents thought that their kids splashing around in the shallow end qualified them to swim in the deep end. When you're a lifeguard, you're supposed to scan the pool every 30 seconds to check on everyone. 30 seconds is a long freaking time. On more than one occasion, a kid would wander over into the deep end. They would be okay for a few seconds but would then panic and start drowning. Unlike what you see in the movies, someone drowning is a fast, silent affair. Splashing is the exception, not the rule. Usually, it didn't take too long to spot someone drowning. The problem was that when a guard blew the whistle and jumped in the water, people would start flailing like chickens with their heads cut off. Unless the pool was nearly empty, this significantly slowed things down. And then there are the people who tried to help. Unless you're a qualified guard, stay out of the way. On more than one occasion, kids got pulled from the water pretty damn near death. Giving a kid CPR is not a pretty sight. One kid did lose his life during the time I worked there. Thankfully, it was on a day off. Not really a horror story, but it was scary to me. I worked at a children's amusement park, and they had me operating the Ferris wheel, which is a rough ride to operate. You have to balance it and put people of similar weights on opposite cars, so it's a lot of stopping and loading before letting it go around a few times. As you can imagine, it's difficult for a teenager to explain to an overweight couple why they can't get on the ride when the only other person on it is a skinny kid. I was only supposed to be on the ride for 2 hours. They left me there for 4 hours in direct sunlight with no breaks. After 4 hours on a busy day with no water and no break and getting sick of having fat people yell at me for not being able to get on immediately, I lost track of whether it was balanced. I wound up making it go backwards and people totally freaked out. That's happened before, but I was usually able to stop it before it went all the way around. Not this time. I physically didn't have the strength. Luckily, the owner was around and stopped it. People were pissed. When my supervisor came to see what happened, I said, "That's what happens when you leave someone on this ride for 4 hours." No idea how I didn't get fired. No one was hurt, but they sure as heck were terrified. I was working in an amusement park as a 19-year-old and was on the turnstile talking with guests and checking everyone off. About 3 in the afternoon, a very young girl, about 6 or so, came up with her father, both in swimwear. Not unusual, since there's a water park attached to the regular park. However, there is a rule in the park that you have to be wearing a shirt to ride the ride, and the girl was in a 2-piece suit. I informed both of them that the girl needed a shirt, and we would be happy to save their spot in line if she had a shirt she could run and grab. Her father raised his voice and loudly asked why I was looking at his little girl and shouted about me being a pervert. I backed off and told him he misunderstood, but he kept shouting back to the line behind him about how I was a sicko, and only stopped when park security arrived a few minutes later. One of 2 times I felt like I was actually in danger. The dude was furious. I used to be an operations lead on the Jurassic Park ride at Universal Studios Hollywood. One day, I was working the dispatch board, sitting in the operations booth when a phone rang. The lead manning the cameras answered, then suddenly slammed the emergency stop button, shutting the entire ride down. We'd stopped for a moment so we could offload a disabled guest, and some brain surgeon was annoyed at the delay, so he lifted his kid out of the boat and sent him to call the booth from the emergency phone right next to the Jeep drop effect, which back then was still functional. If we hadn't been shut down, the kid very well could have been killed. We evacuated the ride and were down for 5 hours because we couldn't get the water pumps back up and running. Dad and family were escorted from the park without a refund, though they pitched a fit. Another time, we had a couple of kids running around assaulting the costumed characters and then taking off. We had rough descriptions, and I just happened to be at the front entrance while a character was walking around. I saw one of them making a running approach on the mascot and threw a nasty block into him as he tried to pass me. He went down hard and stayed down when another escort dropped on top of him. He and his buddy were arrested, and I got a nice bonus for stopping them. This doesn't necessarily have to do with working in an amusement park, but it did happen in one. I worked in food and sometimes had to cover stations that weren't my home station. One time, I was put in a Dippin' Dots truck. Everything was fine for a while, but nobody was checking in on me. I had to pee so bad, but I was really busy and couldn't close down to go to the bathroom. Well, it got so bad that I wet my pants. Of course, 30 seconds later, someone from security came in and asked how I was doing. I pretty much said that I had peed and bolted. I told my manager I was sick, clocked out, and left. I was mortified. It gets worse. About 3 years later, I was on my senior trip for high school and a bunch of us were sitting around talking about jobs we'd had. This one guy, who was pretty mean, started talking about how he had to clean up pee in a Dippin' Dots truck because some asshat peed himself. He said it was in the summer after 9th grade and he was pretty sure it was, by the little kids section, which was where I was. I had never felt like I had such a heavy secret in my life before. Now I think it's funny, but I still have never told anyone that happened. I worked retail with a guy who'd worked summers at an amusement park in the Midwest. He'd been the ride operator for a fairly small, tame roller coaster. The previous summer, a high school kid had gone on it with some friends and was unconscious when the ride stopped. My coworker called for the medics and performed CPR until they got there. The kid was dead on arrival at the hospital. My coworker said he still beat himself up about it sometimes. I told him not to. The incident had made the paper in my hometown because the kid who had passed away was getting ready to go to my former high school, and it was well known that most of his siblings had also passed away young. He was something like the 5th of 6 or 4th of 5 to lose their life before the age of 25, from a congenital heart defect. The last sibling didn't have it. That warning on roller coasters about, don't ride if you have a heart condition, yeah, they mean it. The kid lost his life, and the guy I worked with had to live with the aftermath of it. The family tried to sue him and the park, but it didn't go anywhere once he told the lawyers the kid knew he had a heart defect and shouldn't have been on the ride in the first place. Not quite an amusement park, but go-karts. I worked at an indoor go-kart place for years. One big safety rule is not to bump the carts. The track is wide enough for one cart to pass another, but the fact is they're not bumper carts, and people get hurt all the time by bumping each other. The worst example I can remember. A dad and his kid started bumping mid-race. The track guys stopped the carts to give them their first warning. They brought them back up to speed. They tried it again and had a bad crash. Head-on collision, one cart on top of the other. Not only did it damage both carts, but the kid's foot was so badly injured he almost lost it. An ambulance was called, and he got 13 stitches. We had to paint the concrete track to cover the red stain left behind. Always follow the rules, kiddos. Not me, but my guy friend worked a summer at the amusement park portion of the water park. It was a water/amusement park combo. He was assigned to a log flume ride where, at the top, it takes your picture, and when you're done, you can purchase it. He was supposed to man the picture purchase stand. At one point a family went on, the guy at the top took their picture, and then the wife came up to my friend screaming that it was a horrible picture and that she demanded he retake it. He had to explain that he didn't take pictures, he just ran the stand where people could purchase them. All the while, her husband, 2 daughters, and son just watched, dumbstruck, as she claimed he was trying to get her to buy the picture. Eventually, another employee at the park noticed, defended my friend, and ushered the wife away, warning her that if she did that again, she would be escorted out of the park. Her husband apologized for the incident, and my friend simply smiled and told him it wasn't a problem. He also ended up giving the picture to the husband for free when he asked for it. I managed to ask him if he was working there again this summer, and he said, "No. I don't think I could handle it. I'll work at the grocery store or something." During one summer in high school, I got a job at an amusement park/water park. I was trained on the kiddie rides and worked them for about 2 weeks before they moved me to the adult rides. The problem was, they didn't train me on any of the rides. But most of the time, all you needed to know was which button starts the ride. One day I'm working these swings, the ones that go around and up pretty high. I start the ride when a sudden thunderstorm hits. Lightning all around, and I've got like 20 or 30 people locked into a lightning rod, screaming. I had no idea how to stop the ride. As luck would have it, my supervisor from the kiddie rides happened to be on the ride at the time. As she would come around, she'd try to yell directions to me. Mind you, the ride is only like 3 or 4 minutes, but that feels like an eternity when you're in a scary situation. So finally, I figure out which button she's telling me to push. I push it and the ride stops. But it's now stopped at its highest point, and it's not coming down. I just started pushing buttons like crazy until finally it started to move down. As people got off the ride, they were crying, hugging, and giving me horrible looks. As soon as they were all off, I got down from the big metal podium I was on just as my actual supervisor arrived and told me I'm not allowed to get down from my post until someone else comes around and tells me I can. My supervisor was pissed at me for daring to get out of the thunderstorm without permission. I don't remember what I said next, I just remember walking out through security telling them I quit. I was shaking, so upset. I was responsible for those people on the ride, and they could have been seriously hurt.